Today we're making challah. If you're not familiar, challah is a traditional Jewish yeast-risen egg bread that is served on Shabbat or throughout the year on Jewish religious holidays. Now, looking at the photos, you might think of making challah intimidating, but I assure you, once you get a hang of it, it is really not that difficult, even if you are a beginning level bread baker like I am. In today's video, I'm going to show you two ways of making it. First, we'll make a plain version, and then second, we'll make challah with raisins using a simple yet effective rolling technique that I learned from a local baker. Now, I use raisins here, but you can pretty much put anything you want in there, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. You'll also learn how to make a 6 braided challah for a not only delicious but also gorgeous looking loaf. So, if you're like me, think that there's really not much in life that is better than a loaf of freshly baked bread out of the oven, let's make challah. To start, place 6 cups or 852 grams of flour into a large bowl. If you have a kitchen scale, this is a good time to put it to use, but if you don't have, you can also use a cup measure. I'll also set aside a cup of flour to use during the kneading process. Add in 2 packets or 14 grams of rapid rice yeast and 1 tablespoon of kosher salt. Give it a stir. Next, add in 3 eggs that are at room temperature, 1/3 of a cup of vegetable oil. I'm using avocado oil, but canola or grapeseed oil would also work. And 3 tablespoons of honey. Finally, add in 1 3/4 of a cup of lukewarm water that is around 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Using a spatula or a wooden spoon, stir until everything is mixed. In the beginning, it will be sticky and messy, but once you start kneading, I promise it will come together. Lightly flour your countertop and then transfer the dough and start kneading. Ideally, you want to knead the dough for about 10 minutes, adding flour as needed. Now here you might say, how much flour do we add? The answer is that it really depends on a few things, like the temperature of your kitchen, the humidity, and how large your eggs are. However, I find that for 2 loaves of challah, 6 cups of flour is a good place to start. And as you're kneading, you can add in a little bit more flour at a time until the dough is easily rolling without sticking to the counter. At the end of 10 minutes, what we're looking for is a soft dough that is easy to knead without actually sticking to the surface. Next, coat the bottom of a large bowl with some oil. Place the dough topside down and turn it around to make sure it is coated with oil. Cover it with a kitchen towel and place it in a warm part of your house for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. You will know it is ready when it's doubled in size. Gently push the dough down until you get rid of all the air pockets. And cover it with a kitchen towel for a second rising. Again, let it sit in a warmer part of your house for about 30 minutes or so. When ready, transfer the dough onto a lightly floured surface. Do a few more quarter turns before you start on working on your strands. I find that the best way to get even strands is to weigh the dough using a kitchen scale and cut it into equal parts. Since I am planning to make 2 6 braided challahs, I need 12 strands. Now, we need to do a little math here, but I promise it is worth it. This dough is about 1,542 grams, which means I need each strand to be about 127 grams. If you do not have a kitchen scale, you can eyeball it as well. Round each dough into small bowls. Set them aside. And finally, cover with a kitchen towel so they won't dry out as you're working on braiding. Okay, so now it's time to roll the first 6 pieces for our plain challah bread. Take each piece, gently push it into a small rectangular, and roll it out by starting in the middle and towards the edges. Gently pinch the seam and continue to roll out. If at any point it becomes difficult to roll it out, just let it sit for about 5 minutes and roll it again. In the end, we want our strands to be around 12 to 13 inches long. To braid, lay the strands lengthwise on the counter. And pinch them together at the top. Start from the strand that is on the very left and bring it over to the very right. Then take the one next to it and bring it to the very left. Next, bring the one that is at the very right in between the 4 strands that are at the bottom. Move the second one from the left to the very right. And then bring the one on the very left in between the strands at the bottom. Continue with the same steps until you're no longer able to move strands. When you reach the end, bring them in, tie together underneath, and pinch to make sure that they won't come undone. Carefully transfer onto a parchment-lined paper. Brush it with an egg wash, which is basically an egg mixed with a tablespoon of water. Now we'll let this rise for about 45 minutes to an hour uncovered in a warmer part of our house and start working on our challah with raisins. But before, I will preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit to make sure that it is nice and hot when the bread is risen. While the plain challah is rising, we'll make the version with raisins. The process is not much different, except that we will roll out the strands with raisins to make sure that they are evenly distributed throughout the bread. I'll push the dough into a small rectangular. Fill it with 2 to 3 tablespoons of raisins. And roll it out onto itself. And then into a 12-inch strand. This is not going to be perfect. Some raisins will bulge, and that is perfectly fine. As we did with the first one, once it is braided, transfer onto a baking sheet, brush it with an egg wash, and let it rise about 45 minutes to an hour or until it is doubled in size. When ready to bake, give it one last egg wash, making sure to go into the seams, and sprinkle them with some sesame or poppy seeds. This is an optional step. If you're not a fan, you can certainly bake them without any of the toppings. Place challah in the oven and bake 35 minutes or until they're golden brown on top. You can bake them at the same time or one by one, either way would work. Once they're nice and baked, bring them out and let them cool before slicing. There you have it, friends. As you saw, it was not that difficult. But before I let you go, I want to talk about a few things. 1. Remember one thing. This is a very forgiving dough. You saw it. The strands for my 6 braided challah were not that perfect. I filmed this on a hot August day when the humidity was very high, but even with not so perfect strands and braiding, my challah turned out beautifully. So please know that even if it doesn't look perfect, I promise you, after it is risen and baked, it will look and taste great. 2. For the second challah, I used raisins, but you can use other things like chopped nuts, chocolate, or you can go in the savory route and use chopped olives or even sun-dried tomatoes. Just use the same method of rolling so that they will distribute it evenly throughout the bread. 3. You might also ask, can I use a standing mixer to do all the kneading? The answer is yes. Simply put everything in your mixer attached with the dough hook and knead for about 8 to 10 minutes at medium speed. Depending on the humidity levels and the temperature of your kitchen, adjust the amount of flour, just like I did as I was kneading by hand. And finally, with 2 large loaves of challah, you will end up with a lot of bread. If you can eat it all, good for you. But if you have leftovers, simply let it fully cool to the room temperature, slice it and place it in a freezer bag, tightly sealed to get all the air out of it, and store it in a freezer for up to a month. You can find the recipe along with more tips on making challah on my blog foolproofliving.com. I will be sure to include the link in the description section below. And if you enjoy baking bread, be sure to try my No-Knead Olive Bread recipe made in a Dutch oven. It is one of the most popular recipes on the blog, and I am just so grateful that many of you made it and shared your photos with me on social media. If you end up making this challah, be sure to share it on Instagram so that I can see your creations. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.